Hello, I'm Ellen Binns, coming today from Wheaton, Illinois, in the U.S. Welcome to Impact, a podcast about how we can each bring about real change in the world and getting practical in making that happen.
And hello, I'm Clive Johnson, coming today from Leigh-on-Sea in the UK. A special welcome if you're listening for the first time, and a big thank you to our new subscribers. Each week, we look at one aspect of how we can connect our hearts to offer healing for others with our collective intention, prayers, and meditation, and go behind the headlines of a critical happening in our world that needs our attention right now.
In today's episode, we take one of these regular deep dives to more fully understand and tune in with something many of us may know only a little bit about and see where we might hone in with our prayers and intentions. And as we record, it's July 10th, 2024. And as we come into July and the second half of the year, unbelievable, the global healing response turns its attention to the element of fire. This year, our theme is our planet. Our third quarter is fire. And the creative and destructive power that it influences on our earth, not to mention beyond. We'll be featuring a number of episodes relating to this special focus for this quarter. And today, we're turning our attention to a topic that will likely be very close to home for some of our listeners, and even personally, soaring temperatures in the U.S. As always, we are giving a specific focus here to one geographical area, although, of course, recognizing that increasing temperatures and temperature extremes are affecting many people's lives around the world.
And I was preparing a little bit, thinking about this episode and this new focus, and I often use voice dictation on my computer.
Very efficient.
And my computer very often, probably understandably, like most human beings, figures out that I'm not speaking properly, probably, or clearly enough. And I thought I had said global healing response. And what did the computer come up with? Global heating response, which seemed so close to what we talked about.
Oh, yes, but we don't want that. I think we have it, but we don't want it. Interesting, just one letter away.
Yeah, it's quite scary. Some of the other ideas it comes up with sometimes, what he thinks I've said.
Yes, and
actually, your name, I don't know why. When I say Ellen, it never seems to reproduce that properly. It might get confused because my brother is called Alan.
Oh,
which I'm also voice dictating quite regularly, and I don't know.
Isn't that interesting? They're not quite perfect yet.
No, it hasn't quite learnt there's a difference. So what then are we talking about in relation to excessive temperatures? Today, very specifically focus on what's going on in the US, but of course, high temperatures are affecting much of the world. The United States is currently experiencing a severe and widespread heat wave, with record-breaking temperatures affecting large portions of the country. Just to give a picture of the extent and severity of the crisis, in the past week alone, more than 100 million people living in regions across the country have been under heat alerts. These heat advisories have mainly been given in the western and southern parts of the country, but the northeast and midwest too have not escaped higher than normal temperatures, with a heat wave affecting many states through June. The National Weather Service has described the heat wave as being extremely dangerous and breaking many records. Temperatures are expected to reach 110 to 115 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 43 to 46 degrees Celsius in inland California this week. And some areas in the desert southwest may even reach 120 degrees Fahrenheit. That's getting close to 50 Celsius. You were down that way, weren't you, recently?
Yes, I just returned from the Phoenix area in Arizona, and it's just incredible. When describing it to people here in the Midwest, it's like walking into an oven, and it actually hurts when you walk out into that 115 to 118 degree heat. You just can't do it. You can't be out there.
No,
Well,
no. Very, very dangerous. Very, very dangerous. And nighttime temperatures, too, are also high in the main, providing little relief for those battling against the heat. I guess leading to a lot of sleepless nights. And obviously also more concerningly exacerbating health risks. Globally, the last 10 years have been the 10 warmest on record, with most of the planet's warming taking place over the last 40 years. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, their Climate Prediction Center, CPC, forecasts that well above average temperatures across virtually the entire country will continue this month, with drought affecting significant parts of the southeast, the Ohio Valley, the southern plains, and in a region extending from Montana and Wyoming all the way west to the state of Washington. Well above average in its definition here means in the warmest third of all Julys in the recent climate record.
The affected regions include Southwest states like California, Southern Nevada, and as I mentioned, Arizona, which are facing triple-digit temperatures pretty consistently. South Central states such as Tennessee, Arkansas, and Louisiana, where temperatures are approaching 100 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about almost 38 degrees Celsius, are being felt. And cities like Las Vegas forecast to reach 118 degrees Fahrenheit, almost 48 degrees Celsius this week, and potentially breaking the city's existing record of 116 degrees Fahrenheit. In the east, too, cities like Baltimore and Philadelphia are seeing temperatures touching all-time records near 100 degrees Fahrenheit. This follows a heat wave that affected much of the eastern seaboard last month. Added to the effect of temperature is humidity. I can attest to that. The heat index, which factors this in, could soar into the 110 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 43 to 48 degrees Celsius, in the lower Mississippi Valley this week. The felt temperature is what matters here. For example, the actual temperature last Thursday in Birmingham, Alabama, reached 94 degrees Fahrenheit, but the heat index, a measure of how it feels when taking humidity into account, was 102 degrees. And that's what was different in Arizona also. They usually have very low humidity. So they're having this extreme heat with added humidity, which makes it even worse.
Arizona, I may have this wrong, but is not usually as affected by the winds as some other states.
Right.
As I understand. Right. So the dryness, again, as well, is going to be another influence. I was thinking about Las Vegas. My goodness, can you imagine being on the Strip with hundreds of people swarming around you?
You just can't be outside. It's the equivalent of the Midwest winter where people can't go outside. So it's just a flip-flop.
Yeah, my goodness. Why then are extreme temperatures being felt? We know the basic summary answer to this one, I'm sure. Extreme temperatures are being felt across the US due to several interconnected factors, although, of course, primarily driven by climate change, which experts say has made extreme heat events 35 times more likely to occur than otherwise across North America. So among the effects are the persistence of so-called heat domes. These are large areas of high pressure that are trapping hot air near the surface, and they intensify temperatures that can occur even under clear skies. And these heat domes are becoming more frequent and persistent, again, due to climate change. Then there is the transition from El Nino to La Nina, which is a natural cyclical event that's now in progress, exacerbating global heating. We've spoken about this before, but currently leading to hotter than average summer temperatures across most of the country. There's also what's known as an urban heat island effect. In urban areas where there's a lot of energy being emitted, a lot of electricity, body warmth, the warmth of buildings and so on, temperatures can be up to 8 degrees Fahrenheit higher than elsewhere due simply to this urban heat island effect. And particularly this is true in neighborhoods which are lacking parks and other green spaces which are capable of absorbing some of the heat. There is a bit of a lack of preparedness in some regions, especially those that are not accustomed to extreme heat, and so they lack the infrastructure, air conditioning, for example, and the systems to cope with rising temperatures, which have often not been properly planned for and provided for in preceding years. So it's the combination of these factors that's resulting in widespread and severe heat waves across the country. Climate scientists warn that without significant reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, these extreme heat events will become even more frequent and intense in the future. So this underscores the urgent need for both mitigation strategies to reduce emissions and adaptation measures to protect vulnerable populations from the impacts of extreme heat. And this sort of is prompting a number of areas where we might focus our intention. So willing that those areas that are not used to extreme heat especially will realize that high temperatures now for several months of the year are likely to become a feature of what is to come, the norm, essentially, pressing upon them the urgency to prepare for continued high temperatures in the years to come, and not seeing the current heat wave as being merely a blip.
Absolutely. The heat wave experienced in eastern states in June was observed by NOAA as being unusually early and long-lasting compared with typical patterns for the Northeast U.S. July is traditionally the hottest month on average across the USA. However, since 1970, July average temperatures have risen in 93% of 243 U.S. cities by an average of 2.4 degrees Fahrenheit. Ooh, that's a lot.
Yeah.
The June heat wave was caused by a large high pressure system bringing a heat dome that we talked about that extended from the ground more than 10 miles up into the atmosphere. It is the severity and extent of the heat waves that's concerning many. The climate monitoring organization, Climate Central, warns that July days and nights will continue to heat up if high levels of carbon pollution continue, further increasing the risks to human health. So an intention we might hold here is to encourage the actions that lead to carbon pollution to stop and realize that they are an important contributor to these rising temperatures. Maybe incentivize individuals and organizations to take action to reduce carbon emissions and being aware of how they can do this.
It's just another, we would hope perhaps, example of the fact that climate change is having massive impact on millions of people. If this isn't another wake-up call, we're not going to wake up, are we?
No, I don't think so.
We do need to wake up to this, definitely. And it's significant, I think, as I understand it, if you have a 1 degree Fahrenheit increase in temperature in the atmosphere, that is very significantly impacting the moisture that can be held in the atmosphere as well. So
I was shocked when I read the 2.4 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah, it doesn't sound a lot, does it? But it impacts on the entire water cycle, for example, which, of course, as we know, brings about drought and impacts on
right, which we've talked about a lot in the first quarter of the year.
Absolutely,
the focus was water.
Absolutely. So, looking at some of those impacts and also some of the precautions, perhaps that can be or have been made, the intense heat has prompted some precautions to be taken. Evacuations due to wildfires, which I think we'll probably be coming back to talk about separately at some point, have been organized in recent weeks. So, for example, last week, 28,000 people who had been displaced in Northern California. This was centered on the town of Oroville, which is around 65 miles north of Sacramento, where what was called the Thompson Fire had broken out and had taken over, at least at the time that we picked up on this report, 3,500 acres last week, which hadn't been contained at the time of recording. Temperatures in nearby Death Valley reached 122 Fahrenheit last Thursday, and dust storms, flooding, and at least 2 wildfires had also broken out in New Mexico. So the wildfires are with us already. They are in many parts of the world, of course, but well known here in this part of Western America. Health officials are also urging people to take precautions themselves, including staying hydrated, very, very important, finding places to shade, and making use of air-conditioned environments where possible. One little tip that was given to me some years ago when I went out in the desert in Morocco. It was in winter, so it didn't feel particularly hot, but staying hydrated was a real, absolutely essential for your health. Was just drink. Whenever you think water, drink. You don't have to be thirsty. Just drink more than you can you can imagine you can take.
Yes.
Very, very good advice in this situation. They're also concerned about potential impacts on infrastructure, including electric systems and transportation being affected, although limited preventive action seems to be possible in keeping such systems running. I've heard cases of railway lines, for example, becoming buckled by the heat. And of course, fires can start at electricity substations and so on much more easily.
Right.
And as we said before, also fears that drought may take hold in some states as the summer months continue. With many areas already abnormally dry, soils can dry out remarkably quickly, bringing about a drought and its effects on agriculture, water resources, and energy supplies. Farmers have limited options to mitigate the risk of drought, other than implementing expensive irrigation regimes, which are often impractical and prohibitively expensive for many. So where might we focus our intention here? Let us will that all who have influence in public education, government, the emergency services, not to mention the media, will be wise to know what precautions can be taken in the short term to combat the effects of heat waves, as well as how to respond to emergencies that are ongoing through effective public messaging and support.
Absolutely. Longer term responses. What can and is being done to mitigate the effect of these extreme temperatures? So the ongoing heat wave underscores the need for adaptation strategies and efforts to mitigate further warming in the long term. But how should authorities respond? Climate experts advise that a comprehensive, multifaceted approach to protect public health and improve urban resilience is needed, stressing several key areas of focus. These plans should include establishing forecasting and monitoring systems that can provide timely, accurate, and early warnings to vulnerable populations and give appropriate advice on how to minimize health risks, and bolster public education and awareness campaigns, defining specific response action plans to implement during heat waves, making long-term infrastructure improvements with attention in long-term urban planning to mitigate that urban heat island effect, like promoting green infrastructure such as parks, urban forests, and green roofs. I love that. Implementing cool pavement technologies and encouraging the use of reflective or cool roofing materials, and improving energy efficiency in buildings to reduce heat generation, and creating a network of air-conditioned public spaces that can serve as cooling centers during extreme heat events, equipped with necessary resources to enable lockdowns during periods of intense heat, with water and medical supplies. Developing targeted interventions for groups most at risk from extreme heat, such as maintaining lists of vulnerable individuals and addressing the needs of homeless populations, including shelters and hydration, and strengthening the capacity of health systems to respond to heat-related illnesses, including appropriate training for healthcare providers on heat-related health risks and treatments, and ensuring that hospitals and emergency services are prepared for increased demand during heat waves. And finally, promoting long-term behavioral changes that can help individuals and communities adapt to increasing heat. And examples here might include encouraging employers to change employees' work schedules to avoid outdoor activities during peak heat hours, and promoting water conservation and efficient use of air conditioning, and supporting community-driven heat adaptation initiatives.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a lot we can do.
There is a lot we can do. And, well, if we're given the chance, I think. I must admit, I'm very blessed these days. I have a lot of freedom. I'm not under the thumb of a big corporate or whatever. And when I lived in Provence briefly, even in winter months, it could get very hot just after lunch. So I adopted the French way, the Latin way, the Spanish way. You have a very nice lunch, and then you go inside. Usually they build their houses with very thick walls there, and you have a rest, you have a sleep, a siesta.
Siesta, yes.
Siesta. And you wake up usually refreshed, re-energized, much more, in my case, I think, much more with it to actually be active in the rest of the day. It seemed a very, very sensible approach. And I have tried to adopt that when I came back to the UK from time to time. So I do enjoy my siesta. I know it's not a luxury, as it were, that's possible for many people because of the way that work is organized and family life is organized and schools and so on. But for those of us that have this opportunity, this freedom, it's been very good for me to factor that in. I was also thinking about how privileged I am living close to London, actually, a city that has a lot of green spaces. There's an awful lot of parks in London and trees and places you can go and shelter. New York has Central Park and various other green spaces, but there are a lot of cities that don't. So this initiative around urban planning is very important. I was reading recently about green cities in China where they are putting gardens on roofs and, really trying to make space around tall buildings. And these cities are going up in a matter of months almost, sometimes rather than years, extraordinary pace. But thankfully, it seems that at least in some cases, they're not ignoring this important need. So that's possibly encouraging.
I don't think they can ignore it.
No, absolutely. No. So to build long-term resilience to the increasing threat of extreme heat requires concerted effort and resources. Where might we focus intention? This is quite a big list, but as we said, there's certainly things there that can be moved forward, but it needs serious attention, commitment, and prioritizing. So let's will that all who are in government at whatever level, not to mention those who are engaged in urban planning, architecture, house construction, infrastructure, construction and planning, healthcare provision, and more, take heed and urgently take action for combating the effects of intense heat for the long term. Given how crucial it is for all to recognize that adaptation to heat is an ongoing process that requires continuous assessment, improvement, and collaboration across various sectors and levels of government, not to mention within communities themselves and at an individual level, we then suggest holding as our main focus for intention this week. We will that the need for a committed, collaborative, and urgent long-term response to the effects of rising temperatures will be deeply acknowledged by and prompt immediate concerted action among all US, local, state, and federal government administrations, healthcare providers, employers, and community leaders. Please join us in holding this.
And we hope that all of our listeners are in a place that they can be comfortable and find comfort from this heat wherever you are in the world.
Yes. Stay safe, and stay hydrated.
Yes. That about wraps it up for this episode. Remember, you can connect with us in the Facebook group and for live intention holding in Clive's Daily Insight Timer offerings, and with me in the Labyrinth Activist Network's Zoom calls. Details of how to hook up with these are in our show notes. Look out, too, for our next special topic episode, which we'll be releasing in the next few days. Thank you for listening and for sharing with us and holding intentions. We look forward to connecting again next time. And in the meantime,
thank you. Go well. Stay safe.
And remember, we're more powerful together.
Impact is presented by Ellen Bintz and Clive Johnson and produced by Impact Productions. Our theme music is by Chris Collins and our logo artwork is by Auto Classic. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audible or your favorite podcast provider. We're a non-commercial podcast dedicated to people of any faith tradition or none who yearn for healing in our troubled world. Please pass on the word so others may join us in making an impact. Thank you for listening.